So one of the most polarizing topics for the future of the Ghost Recon franchise is most definitely whether the game should be in a first-person or a third-person perspective. I've definitely noticed that this is a controversial topic and most people have a different opinion on the topic across the board. In today's video, we are going to explore the pros and the cons to each, as well as go in depth with players' feedback and other key points on this topic as well. Hey everyone, my name is Juan Solo with A Squad Gaming, and if this is your first time here on the channel, welcome. It is great to have you. Consider hitting that subscribe button to stay up to date on all things surrounding the Ghost Recon franchise here on the channel, and for those of you that may have been here a time or two, welcome back. So first things first, as of recording this video, it is July 25th, 2023, and we have still not received any new information surrounding the future of the Ghost Recon franchise. We are rapidly approaching the 4-year anniversary of the release of Ghost Recon Breakpoint, so hopefully the developers are utilizing all of this time to make a fantastic game that we're all going to love. So the main topic of this video is stemming from the recent survey that Bullet Catcher Gaming put out. We will be using some analytics from that survey in today's video, but the main reasoning behind making a dedicated video for this topic alone is because this is one of the main gameplay mechanics of a Ghost Recon game. It is also one of the most polarizing questions when you ask community members what they would like to see in a future installment of the Ghost Recon franchise. Everyone has their own opinions, and most of the time they have stories and scenarios to back up their opinions as well. So before jumping into the meat and potatoes of today's video, I do also want to note here that if you go all the way back to the original Ghost Recon, that game was technically a first-person tactical shooter, although that was back in 2001 and the technology wasn't quite there yet to have the fully immersive first-person like we see in today's games, but it was definitely built from the ground up as a first-person tactical shooter. Following the success of the original Ghost Recon 2 was released in November of 2004, and the game shifted over to a third-person tactical shooter and has been that way ever since. So you can make the argument that if a new Ghost Recon game was a first-person game, it definitely would be going back to the roots of the franchise. But with that being said, Ghost Recon 2 also falls into the roots of the franchise as well, which was a third-person tactical shooter. I personally wouldn't classify Ghost Recon as a first-person tactical shooter whatsoever, even though the first game was exactly that. But since 2004, it has been a third-person tactical shooter at its core. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but I just wanted to explain that because there are a number of people that have commented on my videos saying they want to see Ghost Recon go back to the roots of the franchise and have it be a first-person tactical shooter, but there was only one Ghost Recon game that was that first-person tactical shooter, and that was the original Ghost Recon that was released 22 years ago this fall. So now moving on into the pros and the cons of these two different perspectives for a Ghost Recon game. Starting off with the first-person perspective, a lot of people would say that this is a more immersive perspective when it comes to the tactical shooter games, but it definitely depends on who you ask. Call of Duty has done a fantastic job over the years really trying to immerse you in their single-player campaigns with that first-person perspective, but for me personally, I would say that I feel more immersed in a third-person game because it allows me to be more aware of my surroundings instead of having the normal tunnel vision of a first-person game. Also, one of the pros of a first-person tactical shooter would be the attention to detail the developers could do on the weapons themselves, being that that would be the new main character of the game. With first person, you no longer have to worry about all of the detail of your character. You would mainly concentrate on the detail of the weapon because that is always on screen, which I think a number of people really enjoy that in other first person tactical shooters. Also, when it comes to the first person perspective, it is definitely quicker to develop because you do not have to worry about all of the third person animations that you would normally have to do with a third person tactical shooter. You can also institute new gameplay mechanics that just suit a first-person shooter better, like breaching mechanics, as well as being able to peek through doorways and windows, and all sorts of other tactical options, because with a third-person perspective game, you don't necessarily have to peek because the camera allows you to see around corners already. Overall, there are plenty of pros to having a first-person tactical shooter, but now moving over to the cons, it is a highly saturated market with other titles like Call of Duty, Escape from Tarkov, Ready or Not, Insurgency Sandstorm, Squad, 6 Days in Fallujah, and many more. A lot of these games are extremely established franchises with cult followings, so it would definitely be hard to compete against those other heavy hitters, but it would definitely not be impossible. Also, another con would possibly be the developers not focusing quite as much on character customization. Being that the game could be first person, there really isn't a need to have super in-depth character customization if the game would be first person. This in turn would also cut down on development time. Another big con would be the inability to do a proper cover system with a first-person game. Ghost Recon has been known to be a soft cover-based third-person tactical shooter, and that would be extremely difficult to do with the first-person perspective. Obviously, I'm no developer, I'm sure there's a way to make it work, but I feel like the way Ghost Recon currently does it allows you to see the character go to the cover. Maybe you could adjust the camera angle, so for instance, those people that kind of don't like the third-person camera peaks, maybe you could make it so that when you go over behind cover, the camera rotates down, or something like that, so you can't see over the cover or around a corner, and then when you physically peek, then the camera would shift so that you could see. I don't know, maybe that's me stretching. Like I said, I'm no developer, but I'm sure they could figure out a way to make that work. So before we hop into the pros and cons of the third-person perspective, please make sure to let me know all of your thoughts on this down below. Would you prefer to see a first or third-person perspective for the next Ghost Recon? Obviously, the next step for the franchise would be to make it so that we could choose what perspective we wanted on the fly, similar to other games like Arma and DayZ. So now moving on to the pros and cons of a third-person tactical shooter. The main pro would be that the game would be fantastic and there are no cons. Just kidding, I know I'm partial to having the game be third person, but to play devil's advocate, there are definitely pros and cons to having the game be third person. So the first pro being that it would relate to fans of the franchise over the last 15 years. Pretty much every Ghost Recon game since 2004 has been a third person tactical shooter. Fans would definitely be able to pick the game up and feel familiar even if there were a number of new mechanics built into the game. Another pro would be that there isn't really a whole lot of competition in the third-person tactical shooter genre. Fans of the genre have been screaming for a SOCOM reboot for what feels like forever at this point, but other than SOCOM, there really isn't any other competition for Ghost Recon in that third-person tactical shooter genre. This could also be classified as a con as well, because without proper competition, the developers over at Ghost Recon are not pushed quite as much to make better games because the sheer lack of competition in the genre is startling. Another pro would be that the developers could really go in depth with the character customization, going above and beyond what we saw with Ghost Recon Wildlands and Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Because if the game is a third-person tactical shooter, your character is the main character, because you're always going to be able to see your character carrying out all of the tactical moves as you issue them. And let's be honest, who doesn't like playing Barbie dress up when it comes to the character customization in the Ghost Recon franchise, am I right? So when it comes to the cons of having a third-person tactical shooter, I think one of the main ones would be the game definitely has its niche, but also might not be as appealing to fans of the first-person perspective games. For instance, I have a number of friends that are huge fans of Escape from Tarkov as well as Call of Duty, but would rather play a first-person game over a third-person game. And also, with there being more first-person shooters, there are also more fans of that genre. It's a much larger player base, and I'm sure Ubisoft would love to tap into that player base as well. Also, like we talked about with the first-person shooter, some people might not feel that the third-person perspective is as immersive as the first-person games. Like I said earlier, the great balance would be to be able to choose whatever perspective you wanted to on the fly, or at least in the settings of the game itself. If you were to make it from the ground up to fully be able to utilize the third-person and first-person perspectives, you would capture the entire player base no matter what games they prefer. I know my personal opinion would be that I would prefer the game to stay third-person, or at least allow us to choose, but this opinion definitely varies from community to community because, for instance, Operator Drewski put up a poll on his channel a little while ago where the overall majority of people wanted the next Ghost Recon game to be first-person instead of third-person. There's definitely a market out there for both perspectives, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what the Ubisoft and the Ghost Recon developers do for the next iteration of the Ghost Recon franchise. But with that being said, that is where I'm going to wrap up today's video. Let me know all of your thoughts on this down below in the comments. Like I said at the start of the video, this is a very polarizing topic when it comes to the next Ghost Recon game, and I would love to hear all of your guys' thoughts on that down below. Also, do take note that I do try to catalog all of your feedback in the comments section of my videos and get that over to the developers as often as I can. Whether or not they use that feedback to better the next installment of the Ghost Recon franchise is beyond my control, but I do my very best to try to communicate all of your guys' thoughts and feedback over to the developers. Well, like I said, that is all for the video. If you guys enjoyed it, you are excited about the possibility of a Ghost Recon game being in active development, make sure to drop a like on the video and also subscribe if you are new to stay up to date on all content surrounding the Ghost Recon franchise here on the channel moving forward. But that is all for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you guys later. Peace out.